Hello, everyone. Today we have a very special guest on our show. Why don't you introduce yourself for us?
Hello, I am Claire Sawyer, current lawyer.
That's right. We're thrilled to be joined by none other than Claire Sawyer, future lawyer, current lawyer, and alumna of James K. Polk Middle School. As you may remember, Claire was known for her unwavering commitment to justice and her ability to swoop in whenever someone needed a lawyer. But what you may not know is that Claire has gone on to achieve incredible success in the legal world as an adult. After graduating from law school, she quickly rose through the ranks as a prestigious law firm and has since become one of the most sought after lawyers in the country. Her expertise in contract law and negotiation has earned her a reputation as a true force to be reckoned with in the classroom. Just kidding, folks. We couldn't resist an April Fool's joke. But don't worry, we have a real treat for you today. We are actually joined by the incredibly talented actress who brought Claire Sawyer to life on the Nickelodeon show, Ned's Declassified School Survival Guide, Brooke Bridges. Brooke will be sharing with us her experiences playing Claire, as well as some insights into her life today as a mom and a business owner. So, Brooke, thank you so much for being here. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your story and your career path?
Thank you so much. Thank you for being here, or thank you for having me here. So, as you know, I played Claire Sawyer, future lawyer, back in the day. I just did the math, and it was like 19 years ago, I think, that I was on that show. So it's pretty wild. I'm getting pretty old. But yeah, so in terms of my career path, I was acting a lot when I was a kid. I started acting when I was 6 months old. So, it was like right from the jump. In my family, if you're a Bridges, you're an actor. That's just the way it was. Siblings did the same, cousins did the same. And, I held on to that for a while. Middle school, when I did Ned's Declassified, was kind of like coming towards the tail end of me wanting to be an actor, just because, when you're young, you want to be with your friends and you want to do the normal stuff that kids are doing, and being on set all the time kind of made that impossible to do. So it's really cool to be here as Claire Sawyer, or repping Claire Sawyer, because that was a period in time in my life where I actually struggled a lot with my mental health. And I'm sure we'll get into it a little bit later about, how it was being Claire on the show. But it's really it feels like I'm coming full circle now that people actually got something from it and actually felt inspired by it. And in terms of now, I've gone through so many different careers over the years. I taught preschool for a little while. I was a waitress, like most actors in LA were, for a while. And now I'm actually living and working on a farm in upstate New York called Soulfire Farm. And we focus here on food justice and food access for communities of color who are living under food apartheid. And so that's my job. And then aside from that, I also own a small business called Brooke's Botanicals, where I make botanical remedies for skin, hair, and self-care. So things that are made from, just nature's medicine without all the preservatives and fragrances, and just, so that you know what you're putting on your body, and you're putting on your body things that are good for you and your family. Yeah, and I have 2 kids. I have a 6-week-old and a 19-month-old, and I'm tired, it's exhausting. But I highly recommend it if you want kids. It's probably equally as exhausting as law school, so.
Yeah. I don't know if I'd say equal. I made it through law school. I'm still working my way to the kid situation. I think all moms are superheroes, especially when you've got 2 under the age of 2. That's pretty impressive.
Thank you. Or insane. One or the other, maybe both.
Yeah. Probably both. But yeah, I have so many things, and we're going to talk about so many things. I love what you said about food justice and food apartheid. I did a lot of work in food law, so we'll definitely talk about that. But I want to start talking about playing Claire. And, from in social media, it's very clear that it's a character that really stuck with a lot of people. So I want to know from you, what was it like playing Claire Sawyer, future lawyer, at that time?
Yeah, that's a good question. When I played Claire, I sort of didn't like the role, because everybody else on the show, Nickelodeon, you think like bouncy and funny and everyone's kind of high energy, and I had to be very structured and almost adult-like. And so for me, that was really hard, because behind the veil, when I was at home, I was struggling a lot with my mental health and just like not feeling like I could truly figure out who I was. And a part of that was from being an actor. I'm constantly playing other characters. I'm still trying to like develop who I am. And so it was kind of like I was hoping for an outlet to like get on set and I get to be the goofy, fun person. But it was the opposite, where I had to be like very strict and very tailored and tied up, which is hard for a young child. So it was hard for me at the time. I did still enjoy it. I loved the cast. I loved being on set in terms of getting away from the house and spending time with, Devin and Lindsay and everybody. But I probably spent most of my time with the hair and makeup people, and they had these two little teacup poodles. And I would just sit in their chair all day and just hang out with their teacup poodles all day. Yeah. And then I got obsessed and wanted them for myself, but my dad wouldn't let me get any. But yeah, I mean, overall, it was really a fun time being on set and just being able to not be in school and just have a good time.
Did you ever think about the impact that that role would have on so many people, especially young people of color who are thinking about being a lawyer? I mean, did it impact you? But also, did you think that it would have the kind of reach that it ended up having?
That is a total surprise to me. I had no idea, especially not when I was playing the role. I feel like a lot of times people who are playing younger characters on TV are actually older than their role. And on Declassified, it was different in that we were all actually in middle school. And so I don't think that my brain was just mature enough to consider the implications of that, of being a Black girl representing a lawyer, or a Black girl that dreamed of being a lawyer. I didn't understand it for what it was until now, until I saw that thread on TikTok and people started talking about how inspiring it was. And that is just such an incredible privilege. I never knew that this little role on Nickelodeon 19 years ago would have this kind of impact on people. And in terms of myself, it was being in the industry at that time, especially as a young mixed girl, was really hard because there was a lot of this desire to kind of acclimate and blend in and kind of make yourself a little bit less Black to fit into the mold of what Hollywood was looking for. So I think there was a part of that in me too that just didn't understand, like, I am a Black girl and I'm dreaming of being a lawyer in this show, and that is going to inspire other people down the line. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, and so if I understand you correctly, you're saying actually that recently, like the TikTok thread made you realize the impact that he had.
Yeah, like literally just this last TikTok, I was scrolling through the one that you all posted. I was scrolling through the comments and was like blown away. And I was like telling my husband, I'm like, oh my gosh, do you see it? And he's like, I told you, because he is from Canada. So he had never watched the show, even though I'm pretty sure it aired there. He just never did. And so I showed him some of my episodes years ago, and he was like, wow, that's really powerful. And I was like, I didn't know what he was talking about. And so when I showed him the TikTok, he was like, see, I told you, like, it's an important role. It had an impact on people. So it's wild.
I feel like my partner is the same way. He's always like, because this is important, because you're important. I'm like, I don't know. I'm a mess.
See, that's how I come too.
Yeah, so I definitely resonate. But I think it is really important. Like, we talk about representation. Only 2% of lawyers in the U.S. are Black women, which is really a terrible statistic. And it's a number that, I mean, we try to highlight on our social media how important representation is, but how far we have to come. And so I think about, all of the doctor shows and how maybe that's inspired more diverse representation. There aren't quite as many legal shows. I mean, like Law and Order, which everyone knows, and How to Get Away with Murder, and I guess Scandal had some aspect of legal. It had a lot of things in it, but there aren't that many, I feel like, legal shows, especially where we as Black women get to be seen. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about why you think representation is important in media, and what can be done to increase that and the impact that could have.
Yeah, I think representation, as we all know, if we see somebody who looks like us in a role, we're going to believe that we can also be in that role. And I wonder then if that's a part of why, as a kid, I didn't, I'm pretending or acting like I want to be a lawyer, but I didn't really necessarily put two and two together that was even a possibility for me. It was like I really was acting. I really was playing a role because I never really saw that. So I'm curious if that was part of my psychology back then. But it's essential. It's essential that you look up and you see somebody who's doing something great, especially something like an industry like law and, like you mentioned, the medical field, where you're essentially helping people navigate these really complicated processes. That's an important place for someone to look like you who can advocate for you to be poised in your life. So I think that there needs to be way more. I don't know why we're still in 2023 and we're still needing to kind of fight for these new representations on television and film that showcase what the world actually could look like or should look like. I wish that there was more of that. And, maybe that's an opportunity for there to be another show, or, someone on there was like a spin-off of Claire Sawyer. I'm like, hey, I'll dust off the acting boots and jump on up there and do a
I would love
role.
that. I would absolutely love that.
That would be so wild, but also I think necessary. I think representation is so important. And as someone who was an actor, if you think about the majority of Black kids, what are the things that they think they can be? Entertainers, actors, rappers, singers, basketball players. That's kind of the industry that's marketed to us, and not so much these big scale change making industries. And that's sad, because if something were to happen to me, I would definitely want somebody there who could advocate for me, who looked like me, who knew what it was like to be me, and I don't have to convince them that I feel different than they are.
Yeah. I mean, that's so much of the reason why we do a lot of the work that we do here at Barrier Breakers, and we put on like the Break Into Law conference every year to bring together professionals of color, Black judges, Black lawyers, Black deans, Black law professors, because its representation is so important, and people need to literally, I think, see where they could go and even to dream bigger. But I think as someone who wanted to become a lawyer from the age of 8, and I practiced law for a bit, like I do think that seeing you play Claire Sawyer, future lawyer, was some kind of validation. Like, okay, I have this dream. Oh, there's someone on TV that has this dream. My dream can't be that crazy. Like, there's someone else that looks like me who also wants this, so I can want this. And I think for so many people, probably in the millennial age that was watching that at that time, it gave permission to dream. It gave permission to want to be a lawyer. So I just definitely thank you for that, and thank you for the work that you've done there, because that's really important.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. I want to talk a little bit about your own life too. Like, we've talked about the law, we've talked about how important representation is. How has the law shaped your life personally, but then also, so separately, also as a business owner? And I know that you said you work in food justice, but I just want to know, like, how have you interacted with the law in your life?
Yeah, I haven't had much. I wanted to go to law school for a while. It actually was a dream of mine earlier on in my life. And I think there was a part of me that saw, schooling for one, and was like, wow, that's a lot. And I was acting at the time. So I haven't had much interaction with the law in terms of like school or anything like that. But, being a business owner and navigating processes like through, I haven't tried to get any business loans yet, but, thinking about funding and thinking about how I can get money. I think nowadays there are a lot more opportunities for specifically minority women and women of color who are in business. I haven't been able to access any of them yet, but my hope is that, as I build my business, that I can reach out for grants and things to help kind of boost up my capital, because I've run a couple businesses in the past, and the thing that tore me down every time was the finances, just not being able to have enough money to grow to a scale to maintain it and be able to afford to live. I was living in LA, that's where I'm from, but I live in upstate New York now, so it's a bit less expensive up here. But as people of color in the United States, we didn't have the opportunity to gain generational wealth like so many other people have. So I think that was also a part of, I couldn't ask my daddy for a loan, which a lot of other business owners can. And so I'm hoping that I can access some of those kinds of grants and things that are now available. And then in terms of my work in food justice, a lot of what we do here is we talk about policy and the law and how we can actually advocate for change on, paper, so that farmers of color, there's only 1% left in the United States. So farmers of color are not getting denied loans from the USDA, even though they fit the criteria. The only criteria that they don't fit is that, they're Black, but nobody would say that. But they're being denied by the numbers. And so we talk a lot about that. We talk a lot about food apartheid, and it's very extensive. So I urge people who are interested in learning more about what we do at Soulfire to look up soulfirefarm.org, because we could have literally a whole 2-hour conversation on that particular part of the work. But basically, I don't work so much in the policy part. My colleague, and who is well known around the world, Leah Penniman, she does a lot of the policy work. So she does a lot of working on legislature and things like that to help change the law. But it obviously impacts the work we do, because if the law wasn't the way it was, we wouldn't be needing to do this kind of advocacy for folks who are living under food apartheid, because everybody would have food that's life-giving and good for them. And they don't, because there are archaic laws in place that have made that impossible. So in some ways, it's given me opportunities to have work, but it's also work that I wish we didn't have to have.
Absolutely. So many things I want to double click on. The first is that I did the food law and policy clinic for 2 years at Harvard when I was there. And people don't realize that food law is actually an area of law, but it's fascinating. And we actually had an opportunity so Drake in Ohio, Drake Law School, has the other very large food law clinic. Unsurprisingly, there are not many law schools that have robust food law clinics. But we got to go to Drake, and I had never really been on a big factory farm before, and so that was really interesting. And just speaking and learning about the farm bill and things that go in it, I ended up focusing on school food waste and urban agriculture. Those are the two areas that I did it on a whim. I had a mentor that was like, you should do a policy clinic. And I was like, the only one that has spots open is food law. And she was like, well, do that one. And I was like, okay, sure. And I ended up doing it both semesters. I just kind of fell in love with this area of law. But I love what you're saying, because there are food lawyers. There are people that would do similar work to what you're doing, or complementary work to what you're doing, or working in tandem with what you're doing, who are lawyers, right? That is an entire area of law. And so I always like to highlight different areas of law, because I think we think of criminal law and family law and corporate, big umbrella, right? And we don't think about things food law is important. And some of the most important, actually, the Farm Bill, this is a small soapbox, but the Farm Bill is this really very large bill that actually a lot of politicians put unrelated to food items in, because it's such a large bill and people don't read it. And so you see a lot of things getting put in there, just slid in there. And so it's actually such an interesting piece of legislation. But what I love is that for anyone that's thinking about food justice or food insecurity issues, there's ways that you can do it, like Brooke says, not in a legal capacity, but there's also a way that you can do it in a legal capacity. And, maybe you decide at some point, Brooke, you want to be a food lawyer. I will help you.
Sounds great.
But I also wanted to double click on what you said about funding, and totally happy to chat offline too. But as a Black woman who owns 2 businesses, the nonprofit, and then I'm an edtech startup CEO. I'm the CEO of Outline. I definitely understand the funding situation, and access to funding is one of the largest complaints of most Black entrepreneurs, especially when it looks at VC funding. It went down 45% in 2022 for Black entrepreneurs, right? Black women get less than 0.1% or less than 1% of VC funding. I think it is probably less than 0.1%, truthfully.
Wow.
And it's those are really hard statistics when we talk about funding and capital. But I'm excited to, there's so many great things that you're doing. So I'm excited to lift you up, both resource wise, capital wise, anything that I can do, connect you with the Harvard folks, the food law folks. I'm in New Jersey, upstate New York's not far.
Yeah, true.
I want to talk a little bit also about your business. So I know we talked about the food apartheid and food justice work. I want to talk a little bit about your Botanicals business and kind of what inspired you to get into that, and how is that going, and ways that people can also support that.
Yeah, awesome. So Brooke's Botanicals came out of, pre-getting pregnant with my first child, whose name is Lyris. She is a rambunctious little 19-month-old toddler right now. But before getting pregnant with her, I got off birth control because I was having, really this, make it a little TMI, but a lot of people deal with this stuff. So really irregular periods, and, just feeling yucky whenever I got my period. And so I was like, you know what? I want to get my hormones checked. Like, I just want to see. And so I go and I get them checked. First of all, that was a fight with my doctor, which a lot of people have to deal with, fighting with their doctors about getting tests that we need. But finally got them after, telling her I'm basically just, you got to do it. And it turns out I was estrogen dominant. And so I started to do some research, because while I was also like figuring out my hormones health, I was also seeking more natural versions of the body, hair, skincare stuff that I use. One, because I was starting to get really sensitive to fragrances for some reason. And two, just because I had eczema as a kid, I would have really dry skin. And I wanted something different. And so as I was starting to do research on my hormones, being estrogen dominant, meaning you have too much estrogen, and then also looking into natural skincare, I started to see a correlation there. So it turned out that there's a lot of preservatives, fragrances, and other, parabens, which are also preservatives, in our hair and skin products that, first of all, our skin is a organ. It's living and breathing, and anything you put on it goes into your bloodstream. So when we put all these preservatives and these artificial fragrances onto our skin, it goes into our body, and our body doesn't know how to interpret this synthetic chemical. So it translates it into estrogen. So a lot of people are estrogen dominant for whatever reason. I don't really know I'm not a chemist, but I know that there's something about the shape of it that our body interprets it as estrogen. That's just how it reads it. And so we'll end up being estrogen dominant, which can cause a lot of issues like PCOS. It can cause infertility. It can cause all these things. So obviously I want to have babies. So I was like, oh my God, I need to, one, get rid of this stuff. And I started to look up alternatives, could barely find anything out there that truly had these all natural ingredients that I was looking for. And so I just decided to make stuff. Like, that's the entrepreneur in me. I've always had it in me. And so I'm like, let me just make it myself. And damn, it's good. Let me sell it. So that's kind of how it happened. And I didn't really launch until after my baby was born in January of she was born in August of 2021, but I launched in January of 2022. That's when I was like, you know what, let me just get a website, get these things up. The first thing I had up there was a body butter, which is straight up shea butter, cocoa butter, and jojoba oil. That's it. And then I started to infuse it with things that I could grow, like calendula, because calendula is a beautiful orange flower that's really soothing to the skin. And reishi, which is actually a mushroom that we can forage here in the forest that helps your hair grow, because I was losing hair because people lose hair postpartum. It's a whole thing. So the girl with the list, if you need another reason not to have kids, there you go. So I started adding all these ingredients, and I was like, what are things that I can grow? So it just all came full circle, basically coming from me just wanting it for myself, and then realizing how important it was for other people too, because not everybody knows that these kinds of chemicals, since we've been using them all of our lives, have what kind of impacts they have on our bodies. And so that was important for me to teach people about that, and then also offer it if they don't want to make it themselves. Like, I share all my recipes, but if they don't want to make it themselves, that they can buy it and support, small local business, Black owned business, while also improving their health, because overall that's what it does in the long term.
And what is the website? Where can we find that? I might need to get some.
Yeah, it's Brooke's Botanicals, so BROOKES Botanicals.co. The business is still budding, it's still growing. I'm not able to rely on it solely for my income yet, which is understandable. We're only in our first year, but I have high hopes. I have high hopes for this one.
I think it's gonna be great. And speaking of entrepreneurship and that, I'd love to know also, like, what words of wisdom do you have for those that are thinking about entrepreneurship or thinking about being a lawyer, or both, all of the above?
Yeah, the one thing that has always done me well in my life was to just do it. Like, not like truly, just try it. There's so much fear out there, and there's so much doubt that we have for ourselves. But if we can just believe that whatever we try, even if it doesn't work, there's still something to learn and grow out of. That's been the biggest blessing for me, is like, okay, I've had businesses. I ran multiple businesses in LA, and they quote unquote failed in terms of if you just looked on paper. But I learned so much from those opportunities, and I gained so much while they were happening and while they were doing well. I would never go back and change that. And, just remembering that, just ask, like, send the cold email, send the cold, call, as annoying as it can be for people. That's how I've gained most of my opportunities, is just like going and doing the thing. Like, if you have the impulse to do it, as long as it's not harming anybody, just get up and go and do it. That's how I got this job here. That's how, I'm living here now. I met my husband here. There's just so many things that can come out of just do it. Might seem scary at first, but just try it. You can always pivot later if it doesn't feel like it's working out.
We love a good pivot. If if nothing, we will keep pivoting.
Keep pivoting.
I know you said where we could find Brooke's Botanicals. Where can we find the work that you're doing with Soulfire?
Yep, Soulfire Farm.
Okay, yeah. Where can we find that, or where can we follow you if we just want to stay connected to what you're doing and what you're up to?
Yeah, I'll give all the deets. So
All of it.
if you want to follow me, my personal thing, I sometimes wish I used a different username because it's so hard to tell people, but the Babbling Brooke Marie, just as it sounds, the Babbling Brooke with an E, Marie, is just my personal one. And then for Soulfire, you can find us at soulfirefarm.org online or at Soulfire Farm on Instagram. At the Babbling Brooke Marie is for TikTok and Instagram for me. And then Brooke's Botanicals. I also have an Instagram for Brooke's Botanicals, but I don't use it much. So going to my personal is probably better. And then brooksbotanicals.co online is where you can find that one.
That is amazing. That's amazing. Brooke, thank you so incredibly much for taking the time, for stepping into the mind of Claire Sawyer, future lawyer, Claire Sawyer, current lawyer, all the things. We've really enjoyed having you, and we hope that we can stay in touch because I know that this is going to be a real treat for our community and people that are just trying to break down those barriers to go to law school.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for having me. And yeah, I definitely look forward to staying in touch.